All right, it's me, Big Soph, and you don't know the industry you're in. This is going to be part two of the system behind your streams. We just went over part one, which was who makes the rules to all of this, which is probably surprising. If you haven't watched that, go watch that. This is now where does the money go? We're going to go over matching metadata, black box, and getting paid. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let's get into it. Again, this is something I put together in Strategic Artist Society, Systems Literacy for Modern Independent Artists. We go over strategy, systems, and information, and hopefully it helps you think more freely. So today, we just did part one. I've been yapping for probably 40 minutes, and I'm not going to stop now. So this is part two. Where does the money go? We have infrastructure, matching, and royalty allocation. So, all right. So the stream happened. Now what? Where's the money? So one stream, a listener press play, the artist sees in the analytics, but what has to happen before every relevant rights holder gets paid? So let's take a look. A stream happens, usage is reported, the rights are identified, then the work is identified, and then the owner is identified. Every arrow in this little chain is a data transfer. It's not automatic. The stream is logged in milliseconds, but then the process of payment can take months. Think of a stream as an event. As soon as it happens, it's logged, it's counted in real time, it's visible in your analytics dashboard before the song even finishes playing. And the payment is a data process. Part one that we just went over, if you didn't watch that, go watch that one first. Part one established the rules. Copyright, licensing, aggregation, rate setting, and the MLC. Part two follows the money through the infrastructure those rules created. Those two halves are inseparable, but they operate on completely different timelines. One stream does not create one payment. A single streaming event splits immediately into two separate copyright pathways, which is why it's so important that you understand the difference between a composition and a master. Each one of these rights pathways has its own infrastructure, organizations, and payment logic. So the sound recording in the master, it goes like this. The stream happens, the DSP goes to the label or distro or the master rights infrastructure, and then it goes to the master owner or artist. This is governed by negotiated agreements between DSPs and rights holders. Payment timing and terms vary by deal structure. So there's no standard timeline on this. It's basically whatever, in many cases, whatever your label or distributor negotiated with the DSP. Then we have musical work or composition. A stream happens, it goes through a performing royalty system like Curve, and then it goes to pros, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, GMR, etc. Collected and distributed by performing rights organizations under separate licensing arrangements. And then you have the musical work composition on the mechanical side. So you have the performance side here going to the performing rights organizations. Now you have the composition side on the mechanical, where a stream happens, it goes through the mechanical royalty system, the MLC, and then it gets paid. So the focus of this presentation, governed by the Music Modernization Act and administered by the Mechanical Licensing Collective. For the remainder of this presentation, we follow U.S. digital mechanical royalties, the pathway where the MLC matching unmatched royalties and unclaimed accrued royalties become directly relevant. One stream can create multiple royalty flows, and they do not travel through the same organization, nor do they arrive at the same time. So let's follow the composition money. U.S. digital mechanical royalties under the MLC's blanket license. 6 gates stand between a stream and a payment, and each one is a data operation. Data is being transferred between these bubbles. You have a stream, you have a report and pay, goes to the MLC pool, and then it's got a match, and then it's got to go to the ownership ID. So the scale of the system. MLC has processed over $4 billion in royalties with the current average match rate of over 92%. I think this is by the MLC's own verbiage. The system works at extraordinary scale, and the remaining 8% is where the complexity becomes visible. The central problem is now that money has entered a data matching problem. The royalty obligation is created the moment a stream occurs. Whether that obligation reaches the correct rights holder depends entirely on whether the data chain connecting usage to ownership is intact and resolvable. So if they can't match you, you ain't getting paid. That's just period. And usage data doesn't equal ownership data. So knowing what recording was played is not the same as knowing who owns the song. These are two distinct data sets maintained by different systems, populated by different parties, and both must be fully resolved before a dollar even moves. So on the usage side, the DSP can know the title, the artist, the ISRC, and the streams. This data exists, it's logged, the royalty obligation is calculated from this information. What the publishing system still needs, the ownership side, underlying musical work, ISWC, songwriters and IPI numbers, publisher and administrator, agreed splits. None of this is automatically available from the recording metadata. It must come separate. It must come from separate registration database and it must match. Now, this is why people are going in and cleaning up their catalog, because if you just type the name wrong, guess what? It's not matched. If you spelled Chris with a C and it's supposed to be Chris with a K, it ain't matched. Okay. The recording has to connect to the composition. The composition has to connect to the ownership. These are two separate data problems, and both must be solved before the dollar gets to the right person. So let's talk about identifiers. There is an identifier stack in music, and we know which recording was streamed already in this example. Now, how do we know which composition it represents? The system uses a layered stack of identifiers, each serving a distinct, non-redundant purpose. No single identifier solves everything, okay? All of these have a place. So you have the ISRC, which identifies the specific sound recording. Each version receives its own 12-character ISRC, typically assigned during production. This is the recording identifier DSP used to log streams. Then you have a UPC, which identifies the release. Is it an album, an EP, or a single? One UPC can contain multiple ISRCs. This is a retail or distribution layer identifier, kind of like a barcode. Then you have the ISWC, the International Standard Musical Works Code. It identifies the underlying composition. So the ISRC identifies the master, the ISWC identifies the composition. Crucially, I just had to check sometimes that I'm recording, because I have done this so many times and I had been muted or I had not been recording and I have PTSD. So anyway, getting back into it. ISWC identifies the composition. Crucially, the same ISWC applies to every recording of the same song. The original covers, live versions, unique 11 character identifier signed at first registration with a qualified USWC agency. This bridges the recording to composition gap. So essentially, ISRC, which is the recording, let's say you recorded 3 versions of a song, right? Each one of those versions of a song gets its own ISRC, but because it's the same writers and lyrics, melody, composition, whatever, you have the same ISWC. Okay, so that's the first 3. Then we have the IPI number or CAE number, which is the interested party information, identifies individual writers and publishers within royalty systems, required for accurate ownership registration and split allocation across performing rights organizations, the MLC, and the international societies, meaning neighboring rights. And then my personal favorite that I've been yapping about since 2022, the ISNI number, the International Standard Name Identifier, creator identity where applicable, helps disambiguate individuals with similar names across databases and systems. So Johnny Appleseed could have 3 different Johnny Appleseeds. None of them are related, but how do we know this song goes to this guy, right? You see it a lot in artistry. Like if your name is, Chris Smith, there might be 6 Chris Smiths. How do we know that you know, Chris Smith 1 is not getting Chris Smith 2's money, right? So metadata is how copyright becomes machine readable. The system depends on multiple data sets correctly referring to the same underlying assets and people across organizations that do not share a single unified database, right? So anyways, let's go into the chain and what matched looks like, right? So hypothetically, let's call a song Midnight. Every identifier layer successfully connected. Illustrative placeholders used in ISRC and ISWCs for all the trolls that want to look shit up. So the sound recording, Midnight, let's see, ISRC, USA, ABC, 123, whatever. The specific recording is identified and logged by the DSP. Okay, cool. Then we have the musical work, the ISWC. The recording is connected to its underlying composition. The bridge exists. So that means we have the song recording on DSPs, and we know all the people that or we know the work, the composition that is recorded. Okay, and then once those two are matched, then we also have the writers, the IPI confirmed on both writers. Both creators are identified, their shares are documented and agreed. Guys, you should be doing split sheets when you go in the damn studio. It's going to become more and more important. That's why no one has money, because no one can be bothered to do a split sheet. And then you have publisher A, publisher administrator B, both active and registered. Each writer share has a designated publisher or admin with active collection accounts. So that means this is matched, this is matched, this is matched, this is all matching. Payment destinations registered and verified. The system knows where to send the money. Every layer connects. The MLC's matching tools allows members to search unmatched sound recording usage data and propose connections to a registered work, a direct mechanism for resolving gaps before money stalls in the system. Now, what happens if you break one of those links? Which, out of all the catalogs I've looked at, even people that everyone knows, I've been running free MLC scans because they're starting to empty the black box next year, and very few people have all of this. Where it mostly breaks down from my experience is this right here and the splits, these two. So, okay, let's get into it. What happens when the link breaks? Same song, same streams, one connection missing. This is not hypothetical. This is documented category of failure across real catalogs. Like I said, I've personally encountered this. So what the system has, it's got the recording, it's got the ISRC confirmed, there's usage reported to the MLC, and the mechanical royalty has been calculated and received. The DSP did its job, the MLC got the money, the obligation exists and has been paid out to the system, the MLC. What the system cannot resolve is the underlying composition is not connected, the ownership's not connected, and the payee is unidentified. So without a successful match from recording to composition to ownership, the system cannot route the payment to the correct rights holder. The money exists, but the connection does not. This is a conceptual introduction to unmatched royalties, not lost money, but money without a resolved destination. So everyone says no one pays artists. Well, you have money sitting there that you're just not getting because you haven't resolved the data gaps. The royalty obligation was generated. The DSP paid their part. The MLC received the funds, but the data chain broke before distribution of funds could occur. So, what does unmatched actually mean? In the MLC context, unmatched has a specific technical meaning and it's not the same as lost. The distinction matters for both diagnosis and resolution. So, path A is match found, sound recording usage, MLC match engine, composition identified, ownership determined, royalty proceeds towards distribution of funds. The data change, the data chain is intact, every identifier connects, distribution can proceed on schedule. Distribution of funds. Okay. I want to be clear here. There are going to be words in the music industry that are the same word, but within different contexts mean different things. So now let's talk about path B, no match yet, sound recording usage, MLC match engine, no composition connection found, Royalty held as unmatched. Additional matching requires effort. The royalty exists, the stream was counted, but the chain from recording to composition to ownership has not been resolved yet. Unmatched does not mean that stream was lost or wasn't paid out. It means that the ownership and payment chain has not yet been successfully resolved. Critically, the MLC reprocesses unmatched usage every month using its most current works database, meaning new registrations and data updates can unlock previously unmatched royalties retroactively. A registration submitted today can trigger payment for streams that occurred years ago. Now, these are why matches fail. This is real world practical scenarios. Matching failures are not always caused by an artist error. They arise across multiple parties, databases, and stages of the ecosystem. Understanding the categories is the first step to diagnosing and preventing them. So there are registration gaps, meaning missing musical works, registrations entirely, you just didn't register, missing or incorrect recording to work connection, meaning we didn't connect the composition to the recording. Duplicate registrations that create conflicts, that's a big one. Um, Identity problems, so writer name variations across systems, it's not uniformed. Incorrect or missing IPI numbers, your finger slipped and you put a 0 instead of a 9, and now everything's wrong. Alternate or conflicting song titles, so everything, all these things have to match, right? Ownership complexity, conflicting ownership claims. You said it's a 50-50 split. Billy Joe thought it was a 30-70. Now it's stuck. Split discrepancies. That's basically the thing I just said too. Publisher changes, administration changes, catalog transfers. Old administrators still appearing in active data. So when you switch a distributor or really do anything with your catalog, you should be updating everything and informing relevant parties. I talked to a couple catalog buyers. Well, I guess it's a label. It's not really a buyer, but it is. I don't know. Anyway, so label bought some catalogs, from a different distributor or whatever, and they don't do anything. They don't check it before they put it into their system. They just take it and put it in. So very likely there are some issues if you've switched publishers, if you switch distribution over the years, probably have some mismatches here. And then data delivery inconsistencies, data delivered differently across DSPs, distributors, and performing rights organizations, historical metadata problems inherited through catalog acquisitions. Like I said, the system is only strong as the connection between the data sets. No single party controls all the data. Failures can originate from distributor submissions, PRO databases, publisher records, or the original registration itself. Matched does not mean claimed, which does not mean paid. They're all related but distinct events, each separate gate in the payment chain. Clearing one gate does not guarantee the other ones will open automatically. Stage one is match. The reported sound recording usage has been connected to a musical work in the MLC's database. The composition is identified, but the ownership may still be incomplete. A match is a data connection, but not a payment authorization. Stage two is claimed slash ownership identified. The relevant ownership interests have been registered or claimed sufficiently for distribution of funds. A work can exist in a database without every ownership share being properly claimed. Unclaimed shares remain in limbo even when the work itself is matched. So, for example, I just talked to a guy about this yesterday. He said, "Hey, I matched all my stuff. I claimed all my stuff, but my co-writer, he didn't do his part. Does that mean the whole entire part of my money is held up?" And I said, "No, it doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that um, his stuff's held up, right?" And then stage three is paid. The royalty reaches the appropriate registered payee, requires a valid active payee account and correct banking or payment information. Each stage must be independently resolved. So if you got your ISRC and ISWC matched, boom, you're matched. But then if the ownership isn't claimed, still not getting paid out. So let's say you're matched and the ownership's claimed, boom, everything's good, but you don't have your bank on file. You're not getting paid. So you got to do all of this. Now, let's talk about what happens when that stuff isn't done. What happens with that money? Well, we call it the black box. The black box is not just a phrase or a conspiracy. Um, it's not one bank account. It's basically a phrase that's used and imprecisely applied. Understanding the actual terminology used in the MLC context is essential for accurate diagnosis. So, unmatched royalties, unclaimed royalties, and unclaimed accrued royalties. So, unmatched royalties means the usage has not been connected to a musical work in the MLC's database. The recording to composition link is missing or unresolved. Reprocessing continues month after month. So, they keep trying to match it, they keep trying, right? Unclaimed royalties. The work is identified, but the ownership shares are not fully claimed. The composition exists in the database, but not every rights holder interest is registered with a valid payee account. Okay, so that goes into kind of what I just talked about on this last slide. You know, the guy claimed his, but his co-writer didn't. That's not his problem. Unclaimed accrued royalty, the statutory term, royalties the MLC has received but has not been able to match or pay out despite its efforts as the expiration of the statutory minimum holding period. This term encompasses both unmatched and unclaimed royalties. It's the precise statutory category. So, money without a resolved destination is essentially the black box. The terminology matters. Imprecise language leads to imprecise conclusions about where the money is, who holds it, and what can actually be done about it. Black box is a general concept, obscures more than it reveals. But we have to put a label on something to be able to reference it. So the black box is not just one actual giant black box, right? The music industry does not have one huge black box. Unmatched or unclaimed money can exist across multiple royalty ecosystems. Whoa. Multiple royalty ecosystems, each with its own rules, matching process, holding periods, and distribution policies. That's why we see the timelines of everything vary so much. This is a critical distinction that is frequently lost in the industry discussion. So, mechanical royalties. MLC administers the blanket license. Other mechanical collection societies operate internationally, each with their own matching and distribution rules. Then you got the performance royalties. The PROs, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, GMR, each maintain separate matching and distribution processes. International collecting societies operate independently of each other and of the United States performing rights organizations. Then you got the neighboring rights. Sound Exchange collects U.S. digital performance royalties for recordings. International neighboring rights organizations operate separately. Different rules, different claiming processes. Then you have sync, print, and other licensing, separate administration and claiming process, often direct license arrangements rather than collective administration, different infrastructure entirely. So for this presentation, we're focused on the MLC and the digital mechanical system. Do not assume all missing royalties flow to the same place or that solving one system solves all of them. It doesn't. You got to look at everything. And that's what I've been doing. And it's crazy. So anyway, what happens to the unclaimed MLC royalties? The life cycle of a royalty that cannot be immediately distributed from receipt through continued matching efforts to the statutory distribution process. Final distribution, paid, held, or market share, resolved, matched or not matched, matching attempted, monthly reprocessing after matches, MLC receives funds. Wait a second. We need to look at this the opposite way. But anyway, the reprocessing window, market share distribution is not immediate. Not all unmatched money automatically becomes market share money. The MLC reprocesses usage monthly. New registrations submitted by members have already unlocked more than 11 million in additional mechanical royalties through reprocessing efforts alone. New registrations submitted today can retroactively resolve royalties from prior periods. And then there is market share distribution. Eligible remaining unclaimed accrued royalties after applicable statutory processes and holding periods may become eligible for distribution, meaning If they can't figure out whose this money, somebody's got to get it. And the method they do it by is pro rata by DSP and service offering using the MLC's actual distribution data with interest at the statutory rate. And now, why does this market share timeline matter, right? The MLC has announced its plans to begin market share distributions of eligible remaining unclaimed accrued royalty, a congressionally mandated process years in the making. 2021, first month DSP reported royalties to the MLC under the blanket license. The royalty pool begins accumulating. Matching and reprocessing begin immediately. 21 to 26, ongoing matching, reprocessing, claiming, and ownership resolution. Over 11 million in additional royalties unlocked through member registrations. Monthly reprocessing continues throughout this period. Early 2027, the first planned market share distributions of eligible remaining unclaimed accrued royalties. Planning to begin with January 2021 usage, 1 month distributed per month going forward. The distribution method. Pro rata for each DSP and offering using the MLC's actual distribution data with interest calculated at the statutory rate. The rate that was set by who? The Copyright Royalty Board. Every song that earned monthly royalties receives its prorated share of remaining royalties for that month. Early 2027 start date is, self-disclosed by MLC. So if you're watching this, it could change. Who knows? We don't know what the hell's going on. Clearly, there's so much to this. So what does market share mean here? When eligible remaining unclaimed accrued royalties are distributed under the statutory framework, allocation is based on relative market share defined by the MLC's actual distribution data for the relevant period. Understanding the mechanics of this allocation is essential. So the pro rata logic, each song that earned royalties is given in a given month receives a proportional share of the remaining unclaimed pool for that month. The distribution mirrors the actual distribution pattern. Whoever earned more of the matched royalties in a given period holds a larger relative claim on the unmatched remainder. Scale and completeness. Organizations and catalogs representing substantial shares of successfully identified activity can receive larger portions of a market share based distribution. This is a structural consequence of the data dependent system, not a policy designated in favor for any particular party. The real question is, who is best positioned in a data dependent system? The answer is not simply major labels. It is whoever has the most complete, accurate, and timely data and the infrastructure to maintain it. That is an organizational capacity question, not only a size question. Market share distribution is a structural consequence of how the system resolves unresolvable claims, not evidence of systematic unfairness to any category of rights holder. The mechanism isn't neutral. The outcomes reflect data quality disparities. Guys, these guides are so damn long. I need to take a drink. Now, we're seeing everybody buy up a bunch of infrastructure companies, right? I think Merlin just bought Curve Royalty Systems. And infrastructure is an advantage. Two hypothetical catalogs both hold valid copyrights, both are actively streaming, they do not have equal infrastructure, and in a data dependent system, infrastructure determines outcomes. Catalog A's got 10,000 songs, they got an admin team. Metadata and catalog is maintained continuously, defined registration workflow and reconciliation process, legal support, royalty teams, and regular audits. Catalog B, maintained through email, distributor dashboard, and spreadsheets. They got old split sheets. There's incomplete registrations, no dedicated process for matching metadata or ownership changes, no monitoring. Both can own valid copyrights, but they don't have equal infrastructure. And the point is not that the size guarantees accuracy. The point is that the organizational capacity, the ability to maintain, monitor, and correct catalog data directly affects whether the system can successfully route money to the correct rights holder. Size and capacity are correlated, but they are not the same variable. Metadata is the financial infrastructure. Metadata is not administrative cleanup. Everyone thinks it's just admin stuff. It's actually payment infrastructure. Every failure in the chain below is a metadata failure, a missing connection between what the system knows and what it needs to know to move money. Copyright without identity, difficult to locate in every database. The right exists legally, but is invisible to matching systems. Ownership without documentation, difficult to verify or enforce. Splits and chain of title that exist only in informal agreements cannot be processed. Stop doing handshake agreements. Get a split sheet. Usage without matching, difficult to allocate to the correct rights holder. The stream happened, the royalty cannot be routed. And then royalty without a payee, impossible to distribute. Even if everything else matches, the royalty cannot move if there's no valid registered payee account. Data is the bridge between ownership and money. The MLC's reprocessing system demonstrates that directly. When members register new works or update existing data, the system retroactively matches previously unmatched usage, turning metadata updates into retroactive payments. We talked about this already. The catalog can be make you money while the owner isn't receiving it. I think this is what happens to a lot of the people that go viral, you know. Um, a scenario, here's a teaching scenario. Commercial activity does not guarantee payment accuracy. The stream counter going up does not mean the royalty chain is intact. So the song exists and is copyrighted, released and actively streaming, generates qualifying mechanical royalties, appears in the DSP and analytics, streams are visible. From the outside, the catalog appears healthy, streams are accumulating, analytics look good, but the royalty obligation is being generated, right? But what's broken is composition registration is incomplete or missing, recording to work linkage is not established, writer identifiers inconsistent or absent, publishing ownership unregistered or disputed, admin unclear or lapsed, historical claims unresolved. Infrastructure problems create risk, not certainty of loss, but measurable probability that the money generated by the catalog is not reaching the catalog's owner. The gap between streaming and being paid accurately is entirely a data infrastructure problem. So you want to audit these 5 places. There's 5 layers of catalog health, and we've been doing this. You could totally do it yourself. But each one of these points is a potential point of failure. These are not one-time tasks. You need to do this ongoingly, especially after ownership changes, administration transitions, or catalog acquisitions, or moving your catalog. So identity, you need every creator's names and identifiers consistent across all systems and registrations. Name variations cause matching failures at scale. Recordings are ISRC's titles, versions, featured artists, and release information documented consistently and correctly across platforms and databases. Usually not. Compositions are the underlying musical works properly registered with the MLC pros and relevant international societies. Is the recording to work linkage established? Probably not. The ownership, do splits, publishers, administrators, and chain of title documentation agree with each other and with what is it registered? Old administrators may still appear in active data. And then collection. Are the appropriate organizations and accounts actually set up to actively collect the relevant rights for each territory and royalty type? So here is your royalty infrastructure check. For every work in your catalog, the answers to the following questions, you should know them. This is not a comprehensive audit framework, but it is a diagnostic baseline. So this isn't everything, but this is a good start. Recording layer, composition layer, ownership layer, linkage layer, and historical and ongoing layer. If you cannot answer these questions that are on the screen right now, and if you're just listening audio wise, I'll read them to you in a second. You do not fully know your catalog. This is diagnostic in nature. Okay, so this is going to help you figure out which gaps to close. For the recording layer, do you have every ISRC and which composition each ISRC embodies? For the composition layer, do you have every writer on each composition, their agreed splits, each writer's IPI, and the ISWC where one has been assigned? Ownership layer, do you know who controls publishing, who administers each share, whether works are registered at the appropriate performing rights organization, and whether applicable works and shares are properly represented in the MLC ecosystem. Linkage layer, whether recordings and compositions are successfully linked in the MLC's database, and then historical and ongoing layer, that's ownership and anything that's changed over time. So let's talk about what you control. You can't control all this, but you can control some of it. So what you don't control is legislation and CRB rate decisions, DSP business models, platform policies, industry consolidation, and antitrust enforcement, other companies' databases and data quality, regulatory policy, and MLC governance. This is real. The constraints are real. They are also outside of your individual control. Spending energy on that without first controlling the controllables really just doesn't make sense. So what you can control is your registrations, your identifiers, your splits, your publishing admin, your metadata, your claims, your reconciliation process. You cannot control the entire system. You can control whether your catalog is legible to it. The full journey, right? Getting paid is a chain. Listener presses play, rights are identified, and royalties are calculated. Recording identified via ISRC, composition matched to musical work, ownership confirmed, payee identified, payout given, right? So getting paid is a chain. Each link must hold. The stream is only the beginning, not evidence that the process has succeeded. Now, let's just do a quick recap. Part one were the rules, right? Part two followed the money. Together, they form a complete picture of how music royalty systems operate and why understanding only one half leaves you unable to diagnose why money is or is not reaching you. So, part one, the rules: copyright, licensing, aggregation, market power, regulation, rate setting, administration. Part two, the money: usage, data, matching, ownership, claiming, distribution, reconciliation, payment. Music, rights, usage, data, money. The rules determine what is owed. The data infrastructure determines whether or not it arrives. The final idea is that your music doesn't get paid, your rights get paid, and only when the system can identify them. Copyright establishes the right, licensing monetizes the right, rates determine the obligation, usage generates the data, metadata identifies the asset, matching connects the systems, administration routes the money, and reconciliation confirms it arrived. Own the music, understand the system, know your catalog. Guys, I don't know why the hell I do this or why I put all this together for you, but this is something that a college would charge you $3,000 for. I'm not even gonna lie. Okay, so if you're watching this, if you can grasp some of this, and I'm sorry for all the problems and maybe deep breathing that may have occurred on this mic, but I'm not going to edit it. It's too much, and I I hope this helped. If you want more resources, go ahead and check around this post. And again, I'm Big Soph, and you don't know the industry you're in. So thanks for being here, and I hope this helped. Make sure you get your catalog and get your shit together. If you want to get your shit together, let me know. I help people get their shit together all the time. So peace.